It is Tuesday, August 27th. This is All In Horns. I'm Tanner Carlson along with my man Jake right here. See our Twitter handles there at the bottom of your screen. Go ahead, give us a follow, like, comment, subscribe, do all the things. We are All In Horns. This is going to be a 5-day podcast, 30-minute shows. Just get your quick fix for the week of all things Texas Longhorns sports. Jake, we've got a fun season coming up. We are coming in 1 week before week one. So a perfect time to introduce ourselves. This is powered by Rogue Media. We're excited to be here. And we are going to be talking a little bit of the upcoming season for the Texas Longhorns. Nothing that you won't already be caught up on. We know they joined the SEC. We know that where they're at currently right now. We know the playoff push from a season ago going into this year. But Steve Sarkisian had a couple of interesting words in a presser that he had yesterday. And I think some of what he said spoke a lot of volume as to how he feels about this team, kind of the culture surrounding his program. A lot of talk about how he has seen this program kind of mature into his image, although he never really takes full credit for himself, saying a lot of it going to his coaching staff and the recruiting that they've done there. But Jake, what was some takeaways from the Sark presser that you saw yesterday?
Yeah, I mean, one of the most interesting things to me, and maybe not interesting because we've seen this, but I'd say Colorado State's more than likely a little bit more of a talented opponent than we've seen in a Rice last year, for instance. But we're going to see a lot of depth play. He said if you're in the 2 deep, you are absolutely playing in the first half. And if you're in the 3 deep, you're more than likely going to see the field early. And hopefully much more as the game goes along, and hopefully Texas pulls away. But it sounds like we're going to see a lot of guys touch the field. And that's going to be exciting to see, especially at the wide receiver position, where there seems like there's 6 or 7 guys who are really going to be trying to earn a lot of playing time as the season goes on.
You know what I kind of got out of it was that Sark is just as excited to see these guys hit the field as we are as fans. You know, I think he's seen the recruiting. He knows what these guys have done in high school. He wants to get Jonte Cook some more minutes. He wants to see a guy like Ryan Wingo hit the field. You know, he wants to see guys like Jalen Blue and Trey Wisner kind of take over that backfield after the injury. And I think he's eager to see what he has, and he wants to see all the depth that he has, whether that be defensive line with Colin Simmons getting some valuable minutes against Colorado State. He wants to see how deep this linebackers are before you don't have a whole lot of time before you get your big competition with Michigan in week 2. But I even mentioned to you, Jake, I said, Trey Owens ? Second half. I mean, are we going to get to a point to where we're like, okay, let's take it easy on Arch. Let's give Trey a couple of reps. He looked really good in the spring game.
And I think Sark's going to want to try to get him some time, and maybe this Colorado State game or the Louisiana Monroe game. Sark has mentioned it before in previous season. There's no reason not to take advantage of that 4-game window you get where you can still redshirt. And as good as Trey Owens looked, man, he is a live arm. I mean, he just can rocket that ball in there, and he's fairly accurate. And he showed out in that spring game and kind of showed why Sark targeted him as a recruit, even though he's not, an Arch Manning, who's the number 1 QB in the class. He was still a guy that Sark went directly after early on in the cycle. So I definitely think that we will hopefully see him. If the game's close at all, we won't, though.
Is there a name that people may have forgotten? Is there a name that people maybe aren't paying attention to, offense, defense, special teams, whatever it is, that jumps out to you that might be on that kind of third rotation of guys? A guy that jumps out to me, I've called their games over the last 3 seasons for Waco Conley, is a guy like Kobe Black, a big time recruit. He's probably going to be able to get in the dime position, even with the second teamers. He might get some work on the outside corner towards the end of the game, and he might be a primary guy. A guy like Jelani McDonald, might be really fun to kind of look forward to. Yeah, sorry about that. I didn't mean to, but yeah, I mean, what are some guys? They can be the same guys. You can double dip.
Jelani McDonald's guy, I was going to say, there's been a lot of good reports of it about him coming out of practice this year. It sounds like a guy they're really going to be trying to get some playing time. I'm really interested to see Gilbo at the star position. It sounds like he's kind of taken over the starting role there. He might even be getting the helmet communications that the players have this year. And that's allowing Barron to kind of move out the corner and bolster the corner depth. It feels like we should see a much better secondary this year than what we saw last year from Texas, especially with an improved pass rush. Colton Vasek is another guy that I'm very excited to see this year. He was riddled with injuries last year. He's a guy who's going to help that pass rush out a lot, especially in those passing situations. He's almost like an Ethan Burke, but a little bit more explosive.
And I'm gonna go on the opposite side of the defensive line for you and give you Justice Finkley. I think he's gonna be someone that, I think when we first recruited him and he committed, boy, was he on the recruiting trail with Sark side by side on Twitter. I mean, he was busy trying to get guys like Colin Simmons, and I think he's a great team guy. I think the coaching staff loves a guy like that. I think they want to give him as many opportunities to shine and see what he can do. Now, is he as talented as the guys that we just mentioned? Probably not. But again, Sark said we want some third, fourth guys on the rotation.
Is talented from a pass rush perspective? No. He's one of our best run stopping edges, though.
Yeah.
I would say, and he's going to be in, especially in those early down situations. Is he going to be in on a 3rd and long? No. We're probably going to see that NASCAR package that's getting talked about where Anthony Hill, Colin Simmons and
Trey Moore
are all going to be out there rushing the passer at the same time. And that's a formation I'm really hoping we see against Colorado State. I know they're going to try to play probably pretty vanilla against Colorado State with Michigan coming up in week 2, but I do think they're going to have to try to generate some passing rest because Colorado State is a competent passing offense.
And I do want to touch a little bit on Colorado State, but we do have a scouting report coming later on in the week, probably around Friday night. We'll come out with a little bit more of a scout of strictly focusing Texas, Colorado State for the majority of the podcast. However, Jake, is there a situation where you see Texas coming out and looking a little bit like they did against Rice a season ago, or maybe even a Wyoming?
Yeah, I'd say it's probably not that unlikely. I know that's not what fans are going to want to hear, but teams come out and play sloppy week 1. And especially when you're not playing a complete pushover, I almost wish the Louisiana Monroe game was week 1 and Colorado State was week 3 or whatever week that game is, because Louisiana Monroe is the cupcake game of the schedule. I mean, that is just a team that it should be over by the end of the first quarter. Colorado State, while I know they only won 5 games last year, but they had some close losses in there. Obviously, the double overtime loss to Colorado. They have an NFL-ready wide receiver. They have a quarterback who's going to be in his sophomore year and can sling the ball around a little bit. I wouldn't be surprised if that game's a little close, even getting close to halftime.
Yeah, and, I don't see it happening. However, you talk about Colorado State, a little bit of a slow start. I mentioned the Wyoming game last year. I think playing UTSA, I think UTSA was probably a little bit better, but week 3 following that Michigan game, if you get a couple guys that are beat up, banged up, UTSA is one of those sneaky good teams too that are just, it's not like they lack any talent. Now, are they outmatched and out-depth by Texas? Absolutely. Texas should handle UTSA. I'm not saying that should be a question going into that game, but I am saying fans need to temper expectations for the first 4 weeks of the season. Now, if your team going into conference play still playing a little not up to snuff as maybe expectations, maybe then you got the panic button at least pulled out of the drawer a little bit. But I think depending on Texas's record, there's no reason to panic, even if there are a couple of slow starts. Now, with the slow start, that's what my original segue was going to be, was do you still think that Sark goes as deep into the depth chart as he's mentioning in his press conference on Monday, if it is a slower start?
At certain positions, yes. I think wide receiver, we're just going to see a rotation. I think we're going to see a lot of secondary guys rotating. We're going to see the D-line rotate a lot, especially. I think linebackers would maybe be on a shorter leash. You're probably not going to rotate Anthony Hill out very much if that game's a little closer than expected. And then on the offensive side, I think running back by necessity is going to be rotated. It's going to be hot on that Saturday for that game. And you're already down 2 running backs for the season, obviously, in CJ Baxter and Christian Clark. So I think you're going to see them at least rotate down to Gibson in that 3rd running back spot, regardless of what the score is. And now, I think Sark expects them to just come out and be able to dominate that game physically and put it away at the latest by the 3rd quarter.
I agree. I would think the closest score would probably be a 2-score game at halftime, to be honest with you. I would think that fans would probably be like, what's happening? We're supposed to be up by 3-4 scores here by now. It's okay, guys. It's the first game of the season. There's a lot of these guys. I want to talk a little bit to you just because we haven't had a whole ton of time to talk to each other about this on, at least on air. Transfers. This is a brand new team. I mean, this is you're looking at wide receivers that were not on this roster a season ago. Isaiah Bond, Marcus Golden, Silas Bolden. Your top 3 guys were not on this roster. Isaiah Nyeblack, your tight end, not on this roster from a season ago. So your top options on offense were not on this roster. So Quinn Ewers is still, regardless of your offseason, regardless of your spring games and things like that, still getting used to that chemistry with those guys.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. To me, a sloppy start means the offense is going to start sloppy.
Not the defense.
Even if the defense gives up an early score on the first or second possession, I think they'll settle into the game and dominate. The defense has been looking good from all the reports that we've read. I don't think the D tackles, even if they're weaker this year, is going to be an issue against a pass-heavy Colorado State game. I think they're just, as long as they press the corners up and send a pass rush, I think the defense is going to be able to dominate that game away. And then obviously it's going to be interesting to see the special teams with some changes there too.
I did want to mention to you, though, I know you're getting those Kansas City weather reports. Actually, here in Texas, we're going to be getting a 40% chance of rain in the Central Texas area on Saturday. So maybe some overcast, maybe not going to be as glaringly hot, and highs in the low 90s. So for August, that is actually insanely low. But yeah, so possibly getting away with something that's not as absolutely brutal. That's we're typically seeing here in the state of Texas and Austin at this time of the year. So maybe possibly a little bit cooler of a game to where you're not hopefully subbing guys out, giving them the pickle juice on the sideline.
It still won't be cooler for Colorado State. They're used to Colorado.
That's also very true.
Awakening come the third quarter,
and you might have some humidity, some muggy weather. So yeah, it probably might still be pretty yucky. But Jake, let's talk a little bit about what Sark said on special teams. I know a big conversation point, a question actually. You're a pretty good football team, a good program whenever one of your biggest offseason questions is the punting position. But talk a little bit about what Sark said in the presser about his punter.
Yeah, it sounds like Michael Kern, the freshman, is going to be starting at punter. And quite frankly, I think that is the biggest question mark on the team. From reports that I've read online, it sounds like Kern has a big leg, but an inconsistent leg. And when you're on the road at Michigan week 2, getting a 13-yard punt in the fourth quarter of a one-possession ball game could decide a game. When you're against Georgia, when you're against A&M, Oklahoma, some of these big games that are on the schedule this year, that's going to be a position that I'm going to be watching because, yeah, you can sit there and go, well, just don't punt. That's not a problem. I see people jokingly say that, but it's something to watch in this. I don't want to see the offense punt ever, but when they do punt against Colorado State, because they're going to punt, it is a football game. They're more than likely to have punt. I'm going to be watching closely to see how those punts look because that's going to be one of the least pressured games of the year to do it.
Is there a moment where maybe we've seen Arch come in and Arch has ran the offense fairly smoothly going middle of the third quarter, maybe a minute or two left in the third quarter, and then we see a Trey Owens step into the game and possibly could go for it instead, got a comfortable lead? You got to give your punter some reps. Is Sark going to play a little bit more conservative and say, you know what, let's just punt this thing from our own 49-yard line, see if Kern can get a little coffin corner going, see if we can boost his confidence? Is that even a scenario that, because we know Sark is fairly aggressive when it comes to in your own territory, fourth down conversions. I would say about 65% of the time he's going for that.
It's definitely possible. If he feels comfortable with where they're at in the game, they're up 24 points, let's say, for instance, and it's 4th and 3 from their, own 45-yard line. Why not just throw the punter out there to get him some in-game reps? It's kind of silly, almost silly to say, but at the same time, why not? I mean, it really is a big question mark, and it should be a concern if you're a Texas fan, because we, look at the Nick Saban teams. How many times did we see, as great as they were, when they did lose, it always felt like it came down to special teams losing them the game. And that could be an Achilles heel for this Texas team that could definitely cost them important games. And So it's something we need to see play out on the field and see how he looks in his first game situation. Does he shank a punt, on his first couple tries? I'm going to be a little concerned.
Well, that, and then you're going to the big house week too, and that's not going to get any easier. That stadium pulse meter on CFB 25, that thing's all the way up, baby. You're shaking, your kick meter's going like this, dude. So yeah, I mean, it's not going to be an easy environment for a freshman to step in and say, hey, this is a big punt, maybe from my own end zone here with that defense of Michigan. I mean, you're going to get some of the jitters, right? So I think getting some reps at punter, as crazy as it sounds, and as much as Texas fans are going to say, well, you shouldn't be punting against Colorado State. No, probably not. But again, if you got a 35-point lead in the fourth quarter, why not give your young kid a couple of reps? So any other takeaways, Jake? Anything that jumped out to you? We talked about some depth. We talked about some transfers. We talked about special teams. One thing I'm not worried about on special teams, just real quickly, is Bert Auburn. I think the dude is automatic as they come in college football.
Yeah, I mean, he may miss a kick here or there. It's college football, but he really hasn't missed many kicks here or there throughout his career. He's given us no reason to have nothing but confidence in him. The kicking game is just not really an area where I'm concerned at all, but it's just the punting game. With a new punter coming in, there's always that concern. And I think Kern's going to end up being a great punter, but it's just, is he going to be a good or average punter this year, or is it going to be a little bit more rough than that?
And I do want to talk about a little bit of the culture that Sark has instilled in this team. From this press conference, he kind of put a decent perspective on, actually not a decent, a really good perspective on, yeah, we lost a lot of guys to the draft, but there are only 4 players on this roster that are not Sark's guys. And I think they have been tried and true. How many games last year was a 1-possession game or less than a 10-point game? I think it was
in the fourth quarter, they had I think 5 or 6 games that were a 1 or 2 possession game in the fourth quarter. They ended up blowing a lot of those teams out, which goes to what he's saying about the culture.
Right. That year 1, you had a lot of close games that you were on the losing end of. Year 2, you were not so much, you were progressing, getting better, made it to a bowl game. You were winning some of those closer games. Year 3, now it was just you had those close games, but then you were able to pull away and you were able to win comfortably. And now you've got those juniors that are now seniors this year that have a lot of that experience, whether they be transfers or whether they're just Sark's guys from the get-go, leading this team. A guy like Quinn Ewers and the leadership that he has presented himself as over the course of, from mullet, raggedy beard to this clean cut, taken very serious leader in this locker room, I think is a testament to a lot of what Sark is saying about not just the coaching staff and himself, but the players really embracing the culture.
Yeah. And one thing Sark also said that kind of goes along with the culture side of things in that presser that really stood out to me is he expects to have at least 10 guys drafted every year. What a change that is from the Strong and the Herman eras where it felt like, no one was really getting drafted, not in the first 2 rounds, especially.
If Texas had 3 to 4
people drafted,
if Texas had 3 to 4 guys drafted in a single season under Strong or Herman, we would have just been like, wow, that was one heck of a team. It's too bad we wasted it on 8 wins. That's what it would have felt like. It would have felt like that. And last year we had 12 guys get drafted, like you just mentioned.
And now in the early mock drafts, I've seen where they have 13 Longhorns getting drafted this next season. And then it's going to be, again, Sark's talking about how the roster is all of his guys now. Well, that includes the depth. This is a much deeper Texas team than we've seen since the Mac Brown days. Without a doubt, this team is deeper than last year's team. Whether it's better, we will see, but it is deeper.
And speaking of Sark's guys, let's go ahead and talk about a big-time commit that has just landed in the 40 acres. Jonah Williams, a 5-star safety. Jake, you got a little fun fact on the safeties in the last, 3 years or so.
Yeah, with that Jonah Williams commitment, assuming that they keep him and he doesn't flip anywhere, it would be just Texas and Georgia that have had a 5-star safety recruit in each of the last 3 classes, which goes to show you that secondary transformation that we're talking about and we're expecting to see play out on the field this year.
6'3", 206 pounds. He's going to be a safety, but he's also going to be playing that linebacker role. He's going to be playing that star position that Sark loves, having kind of a hybrid mix guy in the mix. And then you add not only that, but again, last 3 years, you've had Derek Williams, and you've also had the safety that's coming in this year, or who was injured a lot of last year. Jake, what was the name? I'm skipping out on it.
Derek Williams.
Derek Williams, but yeah, I mentioned him, the last guy who was injured last year. He was a true freshman. We're going to be a freshman this year coming in. 5-star safety. We were just talking about him off air.
I'm blanking on this as well.
Anyway, we've got a lot of depth at the safety position, and you got secondary guys coming in that are going to be playing vital roles, and they're not just safeties. They're not just corners. They can also play closer up to the line as well and help up front in the front seven and help in the run game.
Yeah, and the secondary is going to be helped out a lot by that front seven, as you're mentioning. With a better pass rush comes better opportunities for the secondaries, and that's going to be something I'm looking for, especially in this first game, is can they create a lot of turnovers? Because Colorado State's prone to turn the ball over, and I think this defense should create a lot more turnovers than what we saw last year.
On top of the Jonah Williams commit, you also had Nick Brooks commit. Jake, talk a little bit about the big offensive line. I know that's for anybody just tuning in or not knowing much about Jake. His specialty is going to be on that offensive line. He's a former offensive lineman himself,
if you can't tell.
Yeah, he. Hey, I didn't say it. You did. Talk a little bit about Mr. Brooks coming to the 40 acres.
Oh. The biggest thing I love about Steve Sarkisian is the overhaul he has done on the offensive line. We did not have big humans with previous coaching staffs. And talk about a big human. Nick Brooks, 3'7", 360. And that is a high schooler. Now, is all of that good weight? We don't know, but he can move. And if you watch him on film, he's a mauler. And the great thing about where Texas O-line is at right now is you bring in a guy like this who has that frame, and he doesn't have to start right away. So you build him like a Trevor Gooseby, who's a guy that I'm excited to see in this Colorado State game, who will likely come in for Banks when they start to kind of rotate the offensive line. He was a 3-star coming out of high school, and they are saying they expect him to for sure be the left tackle starter next year when Banks is off to the NFL. And so adding a Nick Brooks to me is kind of like that, where you're taking a guy who has that frame, has that mold to be a dominant, big SEC offensive lineman, but you kind of are able to take a year or two to develop him before he actually has to become a starter.
Yeah, and Jake, I think it's a big testament as to the recruiting that has been consistently been coming in since the Sark days. But my biggest takeaway really from watching College Game Day was Nick Saban saying Texas is built for the SEC now. Last year, he had firsthand look. Actually, the last 2 years, he's had a firsthand look up front from the sideline at the change from the Herman era, where your biggest guy was Connor Williams, who was an undersized left tackle and had to move to center in the NFL. That was your biggest guy that you had on Herman's line in his tenure at Texas. Now you've got guys like Nick Brooks coming in. You've got guys like Kelvin Banks. You've got big nasties up front, not only on the offensive line, but also the defensive line, winning the battle in the trenches and being bigger, faster, and stronger up front. Nick Saban said it best. He's like, Texas is SEC built.
Yeah. And, talk about the defensive line, how big they've gotten. Vernon Broughton's a monster out there this year. Alfred Collins should be great. And then how about a Sadir Mitchell? A guy who came in last year, maybe he's a 5-star, didn't really look the part as a freshman, didn't really get to see the field. That's another guy who they've recruited. Now he's developed a year. Now let's see him go out there and rock and roll, especially in this first game.
And let's talk about another big nasty. This is just a rumor. This is just something fun. Myron Charles, a big-time commit currently at FSU. FSU didn't have the best of week 0 outings, especially after their bowl game last year. Things may not be looking great there. Myron Charles is let's go ahead and look at his stats. He is 6'4", 300-pound defensive tackle. And if you want another replacement for a Byron Murphy or a Tavondre Sweat, Charles Murphy might be that guy, or Myron Charles might be that guy. And he's currently committed to FSU, or at least very heavily favoring FSU. There's a rumor going around that he could flip, and who he is expected to flip to would be the University of Texas.
Yeah, and our RPM pick coming in for him to flip on 3 from Florida State. And he's a guy who's very versatile. I think he's a guy that is going to be able to play, both a 1 technique, a 3 technique, and you can kind of shuffle him around in that interior. And as we all know, they need to load up on some defensive tackles in this class. So that's definitely going to be one to keep an eye on moving forward, because right now they only have just Sharma committed at defensive tackle. They need to add at least 2 more, if not 3 more, to this class.
And Myron Charles might be one of those guys. So week 0 takeaways, Jake. We can end the show maybe here if we don't have time to get to another talking point. I did want to talk to you a little bit about, and Texas has a very difficult schedule coming up. They play 2 national championship winners and the national championship winners of the last 3 years in Michigan and Georgia, back-to-back champions for the Georgia Bulldogs. If Texas loses, like maybe not week 1 like FSU did against a Georgia Tech, but say they slip up somewhere along the road, this 12-team playoff kind of sets up teams that have early slip-ups in the season a chance to regain some ground. And the season's not over even for an FSU. FSU wins out this year, and they end the season with 1 loss, and they've got wins against Clemson and Miami and teams like that in the ACC, and they still go out and win the ACC. They're obviously get that automatic number 4, top 4 seed in the college football playoffs. But their season's not over. They still have something to fight for. So it's not necessarily hit the panic button. Did they look great? No. Did they play great? Absolutely not. Fans are used to freaking out in college football after a game like that in terms of season's over.
Yeah, that's going to be a lot different this year. I mean, FSU could lose another game. And if they end the year with 2 losses, a 2-loss Power 5 team is, or I guess really what, a Power 4 team now?
Power 4.
Arguably a Power 2 team.
Hey, the Pac-12 is still alive and well.
The Pac-2.
The Pac-2 over there is they're still fighting for their playoff spot, Jake.
Yeah, but it's going to be, like you're saying, fans almost need to not adjust expectations, but if Texas goes and loses a close game to Michigan, there's no reason to panic. Now, would it be huge to win that on the flip side? Because if you beat Michigan, a little bit more of a favorable SEC schedule than I think most of us thought, you really are looking at it. And of course, the team isn't going to look at it this way. They want to win every game. But from a fan perspective, who wants them to just at least get into the playoffs and then go from there, just get into that tournament and then catch fire when you get in that tournament, you can afford 2 losses.
Absolutely.
in this format, especially in the SEC. A 2-loss Texas team is going to get into the playoffs 99% of the time. I'll leave 1% for some ridiculous scenario, but
right, where you've got 11 other undefeated teams and a 1-loss team or something stupid that would probably never happen. Here's my thing, and here's what I said about Texas over the last 10 years whenever they've been doing the college football playoffs with 4 teams, however long they've been doing it, I don't know. But I've always said, from the Strong days, from the Herman days, a 1-loss Texas team is getting into the playoffs. We saw it last year, even with an undefeated Florida State team, even with a 1-loss or a 2-loss Oregon team who was ranked ahead of Texas throughout the entire college football polling weeks. Texas still got in as a 3 seed because they had a big win over Alabama, but they were a 1-loss team against OU. And they still got in. And I preached that until I was blue in the face over and over again. I said, look, no matter who Texas loses to, a 1-loss Texas team will get into a 14 playoff. It's the brand. It's who Texas is. It's the money that college football is going to make out of it. There's so many other factors and benefits of being at the University of Texas. So you're talking about a 12-team playoff in the SEC and now a 2-loss Texas team. I think you're kind of automatically in. I think you're on the bubble if you're a 3-loss team. If you even make an appearance in the SEC title game, you're also in the playoffs.
Yeah, that's kind of an interesting point you make there at the end. Is this is 12-team playoff make the conference championships, especially of like the SEC and the Big Ten, almost feel minute. I mean, are teams going to sit players in some of those games? Probably not, because they want the bye.
Right.
But
I think there's a benefit of winning your title game, and especially if I think there's you get that bye week, you get a top 4 seed in the playoffs, and you get a little bit more rest for your guys. So I still think that there are benefits. I like the way they've done it. I don't know if there's necessarily a flaw. Now, there will come a point in time, and everyone keeps saying, oh, what about that 13th seed? There's always going to be bubble teams. Yeah, that's in every league. There's going to be first teams out. There just are. Like, that's just how it works. But I think also you're going to see a 3-loss TCU team, or maybe not this year, but just hypothetically, you're going to see a 3-loss Utah team, or a 4-loss Colorado team that's going to be banging on the door, and they're going to say, let us in. And I think everybody unanimously will say, I think they don't really deserve to be in. I'm cool with not seeing that team play and as a 12 seed over an undefeated Liberty team. I'd rather see an undefeated Liberty team play in a playoff game other than having or undefeated Coastal Carolina play rather than a 3-loss Colorado team or something.
And they those group of 5 teams, or whatever we call it, the non-power teams, now they do have an automatic bid, whoever's the highest ranked. And I think this 12-team playoff, I really hope they do not change it or expand it. I think the 12-team is perfect.
I think it needs to stay where it's at. Give us time to just get used to 12 teams and the formats and the conferences. Enough with the realignments. I think we're all kind of done with it. Maybe the Pac-12 needs to figure out what they're going to do with their 2 teams. But other than that, I really think conferences need to stay where they're at. Let the playoffs be what they are. Let the fans and everybody else in college football get used to what we're watching for a good 5 to 10 years before we start making any other changes or add-ons or anything like that. But Jake, that is episode 1 of All in Horns. Great time, man. And those 30 minutes just absolutely flew by. We have a lot more to talk about as the week goes on, leading up to Texas, Colorado State. We're going to be here each and every day leading up to it, including an immediate reaction following the Colorado State game. So we will be posting Tuesdays through Saturday. We'll give you a breakdown of the upcoming game on that Friday. And then, of course, we will give you our immediate reaction of the game on Saturday. That is going to be it for myself and Jake. Thank you very much for tuning in. We'll see you tomorrow.